All right, now would be a good time, Margaret, if you wanted
Hello,
to.
everyone, and thanks for having us here today. I guess we're talking about floods, right, Laurel?
Yes.
Okay, well, I brought my VP of Disclosure Source in, and she's going to explain the flood zones, which is a nice little brush up for all of us to have, actually. So we're going to let her have the stage today, and then at the end, we can ask questions if we'd like. How's that sound, Laurel?
Sounds great.
Good.
Oh,
All
good.
right, well, let's get started. Did you have
And
something you wanted to say, Michael?
no, other than I
I
have,
need to be able to share my
I know that
screen.
I'm working. Now, that's what I was multitasking. All right,
Oh,
you
gotcha.
should be fine.
All right. Thank you so much. So let's play from the start. We're going to discuss. Is that good? Can I get a thumbs up if the screen is everyone can see selling in flood zones? Awesome. So these are the things that I'm going to briefly cover today. What does the seller need to disclose? What does a buyer need to know about buying in a flood zone? Will the buyer need flood insurance? How do I read the flood cert that the NHD is going to provide you? And where can I do my pre-listing research? Okay, so getting started on what the seller needs to disclose. I have a map, if you can see that. And this actually, when I created this particular presentation on flood zones, I had an agent call me and she said, "Hey, I've got a seller who says that they are not in a flood zone, but your NHD, put them in a flood zone and they are absolutely not in a flood zone." So I went and did some research, and unfortunately, unbeknownst to the seller who owned a property free and clear, they had recently put him in a flood zone. And that's why he didn't know, because he never needed flood insurance prior to when he bought his home, because he was not in one, and then his parcel and the whole area was put into a flood zone. So that's something that sometimes you might run across as a seller that says, "Oh no, I'm not in a flood zone," when they don't realize they have updated the flood maps and are in fact in one. And they probably would only find that out if they had a mortgage and their mortgager, the person who carried the note, would require flood insurance, and then made them get that to keep their loan. So just FYI, that does happen from time to time. So, what we need to understand, real estate agents can help protect your customers' new home by providing information about the flood risks and give them certain things that FEMA provides. I'm going to share that with you, their site, where you can get documents that you can download, like Protect Your Home postcard about flood insurance and the risks. And some states and communities have specific disclosure requirements about the property being in a flood zone. And of course, the state of California has that. And then you can also look at the flood maps to see special flood hazard areas that they've built certain things to minimize future flood damage, and read about the base elevation of that property. So this can happen when you're looking at the maps, excuse me. This is a piece that I downloaded, or I copied from the FEMA site, that is like a little booklet that you can download right off the FEMA website. Why do I need flood insurance? And that would be something good for your buyer who's buying in a flood zone to understand, that the government requires that homes in high risk flood areas designated with an A, E, or VE be protected by flood insurance if they have a secured loan. And the lenders need to notify the borrowers of this requirement. So you can go to the FEMA site and learn more about each flood zone. And I also have that piece with the which is being recorded with the website on there as well. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that. I think you can see that at the bottom, where they can learn more about this. And then there's the FEMA Service Center, and when you go to their site, you can figure out how to find where and how to find your flood map. So you can simply go to this FEMA site, which is msc.fema.gov, and put in the address, and it will search for that address and show you that area that you're looking for a current flood map. So it's not difficult to search and look at certain areas where, you know, you might go, oh, I've heard this is a flood area, or that they have flood insurance. You can look at it and get prepared for your listing. And then here's something, when I searched it myself on the FEMA site a while back, I have this address that happened to be the one I was mentioning, that it was in Citrus Heights, California, which is a suburb of Sacramento. And the gentleman was, no, I'm not in a flood site. And then come to find out, they had remapped, and he absolutely was in a flood jurisdiction or a flood inundation area. And here's the map that I brought up from that. So a real estate professional or a lending professional, the clients rely on you to help them understand the potential risks to their current or prospective home, including the flood risk. So it's good for you to take a look at this with them. And one thing that's really nice is that Disclosure Source is going to determine whether or not they're in a flood zone. And then they're also going to send you a piece of information that is crucial to your listing, which we'll discuss in a minute. But when you go to the FEMA site to look at an area or a particular parcel, they have key coding on their site to help you read it. It's all done with letters and numbers as to the elevations and so forth. But you know, you don't need to be a professional in understanding flood maps. You just simply need to know that they are in a flood risk area and may need flood insurance. And it will be their responsibility to decide whether or not they're willing to live in an area that has a risk of flooding. So in this particular map, if you look at it, you can see the parcel was definitely right in a flood area that was determined that it would flood should there be a major problem in that area. It was an AE zone. And this is just a zoom in to show you what that looked like. There's a creek that runs along through these homes' properties. And of course, some of them are not going to flood. Others potentially very well may, based on the elevation of the home. But that's not the only thing that could protect them. Not just that, but if they've had work done. So we're going to discuss that as well. Here are the designations for flood zones. So each flood is represented by a differently on the flood map, conveying low, moderate, and high risk flood zones. The images on the right highlight the high risk flood zones, which is a zone A, AO, AH in a blue shade. The moderate risk areas are zone X and have an orange shading, and low risk areas are zone X that have a clear or not shaded at all. So you can see those based on the map, what it looks like as to whether or not they would have a high risk or a low risk. If you look at that map, you can see the high versus the low risk areas, and then not at all. And then of course, you can zoom in on specific on the map, on the FEMA site, and pin an approximate location, look at the map number and effective date of when they remapped it, and the zone designation, whether it's a zone, in the case of this one, a zone AE, which definitely is a flood zone that they would very likely, the buyer would have to get flood insurance if they have a loan and or want to protect their parcel themselves, even if they don't have a loan. So just know that those are acronyms, and all of those determinations are right on the FEMA site. So the question is, what are the flood zone designations? So we talked about the A and the V are the high risk. And then you have what's called a base flood. So the floodwaters of a base flood are defined by how they've determined how the land will be covered by floodwaters. And so you can look at that base elevation. Non-special flood hazard areas are moderate to low risk areas, and they show up as a B, C, or an X, including shading or unshading. They'll have the determination with a letter as to their level of risk, moderate or low risk. And the risk of flooding is lower, but it still exists in these communities that participate in this. And flood insurance is available for them, but it's not mandatory. They may want it, and it'll probably be at a lower cost than someone who would absolutely mandatorily need flood insurance. So just know that they'll give you all the determinations. And these maps show flood maps. Sorry, I'm skipping around here. I apologize. My cursor's a little bit trigger happy. So the FEMA site has terms in their summary division, and those terms of summary talk about the flood maps, the flood plans, the mitigation, the insurance. They talk about the zones, the hazard risks. They talk about special flood hazard areas, non-flood hazard areas, and base elevation, which they figure out the percentage of their risk. And you can go and read all of that, or your client can read all of that if they want to understand more about it. Now, there is a special way that a owner can get out of needing flood insurance, and that happens occasionally, and that is if they have what's called a LOMAC or a LOMAR. So a LOMAC is a document that's issued by FEMA that revises or amends the flood hazard information on the flood map. The types of letters that are included on that LOMAR as a LOMAR FS and a letter map of revision amendment, a LOMA. So if they have a LOMAC, letter map of change, a LOMAR, a letter map of revision, they may have been able to wipe out their need for flood insurance or reduce the risk greatly. And those amendments have to be the maps have to be drawn up by a land surveyor or someone who is a professional in that field to determine their elevation within relation to the flood zone and the level of severity. So, some property owners may apply for those LOMA or LOMARs, just FYI, and I'm going to share with you how they can do that, and I'll share an experience. So there's lots of information on the FEMA site, like flood preparation. How do I buy flood insurance? And it gives them just the data. It doesn't take them to an insurer, but it tells them what they need to do. So it's not a sales tool. It's just a tool for education for your buyer. And then hazard mitigation assistance grants are available through FEMA, and how to be flood smart. And then the National Flood Insurance Program that's available, and financial assistance on their website should an owner need that. And that could be a beneficial resource for you when you're dealing with a seller who maybe has a financial problem and they can't pay for their flood insurance. Maybe they need some help. They may be able to find that through FEMA, because they do have assistance for homeowners that are destitute. And then there's special flood hazard area resources. Know your flood risk. You can search that. You can search the flood insurance rate map. Just lots of good contact information right on the FEMA website that you can research. So I took a screenshot of this particular, when you order the natural hazard from us, we also provide you with a flood cert. And this is a sample of a flood cert that I took a screenshot of the one that ended up being put into a flood zone that wasn't prior. So I want to show you a couple things on this, because anytime you as an agent for your seller order a natural hazard from Margaret, with Disclosure Source, we're going to automatically include this flood cert with it if they fall in a FEMA mapped area. If they're not, they don't have one. They don't need one. But if they do fall in a FEMA area, they may have had what we talked about before, the LOMAR or the LOMAC, the letter map of change, or the letter map of revision. So, for example, my neighbor, not too many streets over here, just one street over, has a creek running behind his home. It runs behind all the homes there on that side of the street. And he had flood insurance. He recently built two wings onto the back of his home. And we were talking about him getting an elevation survey to do so. When he got that elevation survey, it absolutely wiped out the need for flood insurance because it determined the creek was so low compared to his elevation of his home that he would never flood. So he was able to take that survey, and the land surveyor was able to submit it to FEMA, and it basically got rid of his need for flood insurance, which was pretty amazing. So you can do that, but you do have to go through the processes, and it's not cheap. I think he spent $2,600 getting that survey done so that he could do the build, though. So it was probably a little more because he was going to build and he had to have a lot done to get ready for that build. But just looking at this flood cert, if you receive one, you're going to see at the top an expiration date, and you'll be like, what? That is the date, the last date that the cert was updated. So it's not expired because it's older than the date today or whenever you received it. It's just the last date that is in relation to when the cert was updated, the certificate. And then you're going to see in section B3, is there a letter map of change, a LOMAC or revision? And that will show you yes or no. If they've had that recorded, then it will show up there. In box 4 of B, when you can see the long blue arrows that I have, it'll tell you the determination. So an AE is a high risk flood zone, like that gentleman who didn't think he was in a flood zone and they put him in a high risk. And then that next box talks about there's a regular program of flood insurance available program. And then is flood insurance required is going to be down in the determination section. And if it's yes, the box will be checked yes. If it's no, then it could be that even though it's no, it could only be reduced, and this owner may still and or the lender may still require it because it's only the risk is only reduced, not removed. But generally speaking, they require it if it's a yes and not always require it when it's a no. So just FYI, when you're looking at this flood cert, and then at the bottom right-hand corner is the date of determination, and that was the last date they determined this cert. So you could see the date of determination. They had revised in July the area that this gentleman lived in, and his cert became effective as of July 2024. Those dates can be older. They can be years and years old since the last time they revised them, but that is the last date they did that. So why would you want to use Disclosure Source? I think you've all been on some classes with us, and it's super important to vet your vendor because according to the Civil Code, you're responsible for what you choose in NHD and who's going to stand behind you. And we're owned by Fidelity, which is a Fortune 500 company. So of course, we're going to stand behind you and protect you, and also your broker of record and your TC and your escrow officer and everyone involved in the transaction. We're going to protect them all. So it's very important that you choose a vendor that's going to take good care of you. Now, I wanted to show you briefly, and I'm going to share this screen. And this is the actual FEMA site that we're looking at. And I think everybody can see that, correct? So this shows you how you can change your flood zone designation. If you actually had documents that you wanted to submit to FEMA that you had an elevation survey done, you could submit a map of change request and you could upload your documents right on the FEMA website. So it has on the site different things that you can do if you have a letter map of revision, how to upload those application forms and so forth. So any buyer who wants to update their information on the FEMA website can go there and do that for their clients. So just FYI, if you would like to search the FEMA site, you can go there. You can look at their flood maps. You can do research, search their site for whatever you need. So there's that for you. All right, so let's open it up to any questions that you have. If I have the answers, I'm happy to provide those for you, but if not, I'll do some research. Does anyone have any questions on the what we reviewed?
They're being polite and
They're so polite.
not blurting out questions all at once.
Well, I don't know how much flood areas that you deal with. Do you have many of those in your area, Michael?
Yes. Yeah, I sold a property up in Ben Lomond, which is up in the sticks, right next to could be called a creek, but when it rains, this is a river. And we had to go through all that. If you want to be next to a creek, I oftentimes get clients who will say, well, down in the valley, there's flood risk, and my reaction is, well, if you don't want that, you have to live up on the mountaintops. But they also have landslides. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
fires usually. Well, I put in the chat my phone number and my email, and I know Margaret can put into the chat her email and phone number as well. So we're your easy button when it comes to ordering. All you have to do is reach out to Margaret with a text message, an email, or a phone call, and she'll take care of you for your natural hazard disclosure needs and or home warranty. And if you get an NHD and you're like, "Oh, I need some help before I go over this with my seller or buyer," please feel free to reach out to us. We're there to help. And we have staff inside as well that are wonderful and very educated on the NHD. So they're more than happy to walk you through it as well. And I think we have one more presentation coming up in a few weeks for you, Michael.
I believe so.
Yeah.
And you're
That
assuming,
one's the selling in fire zones.
I think that you're assuming I know what my schedule's like.
Well, we did the 101 first, and then this one, and I think the next one is selling in fire zones. So
And then I had mentioned the possibility of an earthquake one at some point. I was going to call the earthquake class shake and bake. That's
well, it's this is my message, how I talk to some homeowners who end up calling me, and I'll share this with you. Wherever you live, because we live in one of the most beautiful states, you're going to have some risk. It doesn't matter where you live. I used to live in southern Indiana. The largest earthquake fault ran right through my backyard, the New Madras Fault. So, but in California, you've got fire zones, flood zones, earthquake zones, liquefaction zones. You've got all kinds of potential risk. But it's also, we live with that every day. If you drive a car, you risk, that potentially of someone hitting your car. If just whatever you do in life, there are risks. It's just making sure that your buyers and sellers understand those risks and what they're taking on, and that we just disclose those things to them in the best way possible. But of course, we don't want to scare them because, you can't live in fear. You want to enjoy life, right? So I think if you're buying in an area that's a fire zone, it's because you love waking up and seeing trees. And if
Yeah.
you're buying near an area that's a flood zone, it's because you love living by a body of water. And so you love that you will take on the risk to enjoy what you get from it. And that's basically just having that conversation with the buyer. Hey, I think you're buying in a flood zone because there's that water, there's that beautiful creek running through your property. So just understanding that and being able to relate to that is good.
Janet, did you have a question?
Not a question, but just something that came up recently. I have a friend of mine who is moving to Utah, and I decided to do a lot of research for her on what are things to worry about over there? Shallow water tables and the radon. So, I mean, I never even addressed radon. If it's in a geohazard report, great, but I never seem to see it. But it's a real
Radon
flood.
is naturally occurring. It occurs
Right.
out of the ground, out of rock. I mean,
Right.
we've been living with it for thousands of years.
Right.
But there are some areas that have higher levels of radon, and you can have those tests done. So, my brother bought a home in Indianapolis, or a suburb, and they found high levels of radon. There are some areas in like Janice just said, Reno and Tahoe have radon, but it's about certain things that you can do to mitigate the risk of that, and how much risk is there. I mean,
right. So we discovered that, it was a moderate risk over there. And then she had the house tested and the ground tested around the house and such. And it ended up being like the goal is to be under 4 parts per million or something like that. And she was at like 1.9 in the house, and the slab absorbs most of that. And then it was only 1.9 out. So I decided to look up Santa Clara County, and we're in the moderate zone also. And I just, I'd never thought about getting my house tested, and the acreage we're on, et cetera. So it was kind of interesting that, we've got floods and earthquakes and all these different things that are natural hazards. But I never, ever thought about radon. It's the leading cause of lung cancer and deaths in Utah.
Wow. So that's nice that you, here's the cautionary tale. Be very careful, because you always want your buyer to do their research and make their decisions based on their research.
Right.
Because if you miss something, they could come back at you later,
Right.
And so it's a fine line. That's your friend, and you were kind of helping her. You weren't her agent probably for the purchase.
No.
But we have to be so careful in the industry that we're in, because we walk a fine line of caring about them, but being careful as well how we disclose and or advise, because you don't want to end up in court later because they're saying they relied on you to do the research.
Right.
You always want to put it to them to do the research.
Yeah, I urged her to, have the radon inspection done, and it was a brand new house, but it's still, they found the home inspector found several issues that the builder has to repair and such. Mm-hmm. But as far as the radon, it was a lot lower than what Crystal City was written about to have super high levels.
That's smart. Well, it probably gave her some peace of mind, huh?
Oh, it did, definitely. Then that way she could move forward with the purchase.
Right.
This has always been with me one of the conundrums with the environmental hazards booklets, right? Because there's pamphlets.
Right.
But one of the things, as a general concept, as a real estate agent, you need to have a cursory understanding of a whole lot of stuff, but not necessarily a detailed understanding. So it doesn't look good if the buyer's reading one of the environmental books and mentions radon, and you say, "What's that?" And they're like, "Well, it's in the book." Well, gee, I never heard it. That doesn't look good, because it shows that you've never even read the books, the pamphlets. The other side, though, is that if somebody reads all of that stuff, they'll start to, well, if they internalize it, they won't want to leave. I don't know where they're going to go, because if you're inside the house, then there's the formaldehyde and asbestos and all of that. You go outside, now there's no slab preventing the radon from getting you. And then there's the flood, and then, I mean, if that's what we concentrate on, you could find a lot of reasons not to buy anything. But you need to be able to explain that lots of people are buying properties and that they're in the same area. And that, one of the comments I tend to make is that the lender who's putting in more money than you are is going to check to see if it's in a fire zone or a flood zone and if insurance is necessary. And sometimes, one way to look at it is if they're good and they're the ones putting up most of the money, it's a calculated risk, right? But we have to sort of find the middle ground between scaring people away, and then that doesn't help them because then they don't buy anything, and then prices go up, and they still don't buy anything, and then they found out that everywhere it falls into one of these zones of some sort. And,
So you mentioned, Michael, that it would be a good idea. You want a broad education of to help your clients, but you have over 800 disclosures and addendums in your arsenal. I am blown away at what you guys have available. When I got car certified, became a certified forms trainer, I was like, oh my goodness, these poor people. This is so much. There's just so much. But if you'd like to read through an earthquake book, you can go to Disclosure Source's website. I pulled it up for you here. It's just www.disclosuresource.com. And right up here on the resource button, as you can see, is all of the booklets for you. So they're free. When we send the NHD to you, we attach all of those in the email for your buyer to open and read. We also attach them on the signing page of the report so they can click them live and interactive and read them. But if you need a copy, if you would like to look at it, you can click on any of these and it will open up the book, the hazard guide booklet for you. You can download it and save it and so forth. So those are all available right on our website in case you're looking for them. Just FYI.
Great, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
they're also available in car.org zip forms. When you go to add a form in the library, many people don't realize there's more than one library. But, we just look at the CAR forms. If you click on the little drop-down arrow, you'll see EPUBs, which has all of the pamphlets. And
Nice.
you can even send them out for signatures or read them if you had insomnia sometime.
Do you upload your files to zip forms, to zip vault, I mean?
No. Well, we don't. First of all, we don't purchase Zip Vault because we use SkySlope and the
Okay.
broker is in charge of it. If I were running my own brokerage, I would think about it. But it's not our job to keep it's their job. So they have
Well,
everything in SkySlope.
SkySlope is a wonderful program too. I mean, I just wondered because I used to teach a class. It was a hard copy file, and I taught how to organize your file to find any document at a moment's notice. Back before we had these online platforms, it was a long time ago. I wrote a syllabus for the DRE and used to teach that. And as time went on, more online, file savings were created. And so, ZipVault was one of those that I knew some agents used, but SkySlope is a wonderful program too.
Yeah, I know brokers who still keep paper records.
I've had brokers ask me to teach that class in hard copy format because they needed their agents to understand all the documents and look at them, with real paper, and say, okay, this is this. I understand what this is, even though it's electronic. I've reviewed it, put it in this section and so forth. So, but it's wonderful that they now have programs where you can go and look at all your disclosures, all your inspections, all of your, advisories and so forth. So I just wondered what you use. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, can I answer any questions on the NHD while we're on before we,
Flood off.
or Margaret might have some little special nugget for you for home warranty. That's
Well,
all.
I wanted to ask, they're not a designated Crest office, but they do only order Crest from me through Mike Devlin's team. So is there any advantages at all of them using the Crest NHD?
So for
That's just a question
you
that
do not have Crest insured, right? You're not Crest insured.
Just so you realize that you and me and we may be the only three that know what Crest is.
Okay,
Okay.
so Crest is
Just-
an Arizona emissions company that writes E&O in the state of California and other states. That's who they are.
Right.
So they've come to us and asked us to write different programs for them. So the nice thing about the home warranty is you can spend a little extra money, but get an extra month of coverage. That's all you get. You don't get
And that's what they're doing, but I just wasn't sure because
There's
it's
no
so new to
benefits
us.
to the NHD
Yeah.
unless you're Crest insured.
Okay.
So Margaret, let me ask you a question. I'm writing an offer. I haven't written an offer before. It's $1 million property. I want the seller to pay for a home warranty. I need a number to write in. What would be the easiest way besides calling you? And
I just need to know if it's under 5,000 square feet.
yeah, it's under 5,000 square feet.
Okay. And you're not talking seller's coverage. You're talking just regular coverage.
I'm just making stuff up, but yes, we're not talking seller's coverage.
Yeah. The max out that you'd want is 825. And if it's high end appliances, then it's 925. So you're looking at about that number for a home warranty, because if it's a pretty expensive home, it's probably has high end appliances, so that we could get them a $10,000 aggregate rather than a $5,000 aggregate.
Right.
So right around 925.
Yeah.
And you can always ask Margaret to send you a brochure, and then you can look it over with your client if need be. And in that brochure, it's going to talk about what the potential coverage is. And there might be something that they want that, they want to customize that particular, home with specialized coverage. They may have had.
Yeah, but he has the listing. He's just wondering what a ballpark frank it is.
So
No,
it's got the
I was just
cost.
giving a hypothetical if I was
Yeah.
making an offer. In order to know the number, you would need to be able to look at something like this and figure out, is there air conditioning? Is there no air conditioning? What are you going to add?
And
It's
on
always a
million,
great text to Margaret because you can just say, hey, I got a house. It's 5,000 square feet or 3,800 and it's got this, and this. How
yeah,
much?
that's where the number changes if the house is 5,001 square feet. So if
Anything-
it's 5,001, we have to call it in. If it's under, then it follows under the guidelines of our brochures.
And
Okay.
it includes specialized coverage, like if they have a pool spa, if they want an outdoor kitchen coverage or septic tank or well pump. There's lots of variables on specialized coverage for those nice homes.
Let me make two home warranty comments for the group. One is, if you're buying your buyer a home warranty plan, which I'm not saying you ought to, but as a closing gift, oftentimes it's done, because isn't it true, Margaret, that if I buy my buyer a home warranty plan, rather than having the seller do it directly, there would be a marketing advantage to me? Is that true?
You always have a marketing advantage anyhow. Going on our website to homewarranty.com, we have a plethora of marketing materials for your agents on there. And we don't violate RESPA whatsoever. So they can send out flyers, monthly newsletters, all types of things. And they can build their profile, have their signature on it, the whole 9 yards. So the only advantage is what's in that home as the buyer buying it, and you have control over it because, like in my last meeting, if you let the listing order it, they might order you guys the least expensive, and they're not even covering the refrigerator, the washer, or the dryer. And then everyone calls it a day going, oh, it was ordered. Then you find out your clients were not even taken care of. It was one of the cheapest plans out there, and you weren't aware of it because it was already ordered. So I try to follow up with stuff like that. If I see that the listing agent ordered it, I'll call the agent, the buyer's agent, saying, is this what you guys approved of? Because it just doesn't do anybody any good. And then it ends up hurting me, hurting the buyer, hurting you. It just hurts the relationship. So it really is best if you get on top of it right away, right when you get into escrow. Don't wait till the last 3 days. Do it at the very beginning, even before your 17 days. Because if anything goes south or you have to cancel it, we cancel it. It's that simple. But you're better off just, tidying it up and get it all done on your end with your TC, because you're the one who wants the copy for your records. They could care less.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the natural hazard. You can have Margaret order it for you. You can order it. You can call in and order it however you want to do that. It's easy. But you can order that when you take the listing and attach it to your listing. So now all buyer's agents are going to be able to see, hey, you're going to have to get fire insurance, or hey, you're going to have to get flood insurance. They're going to see that, and it will guide whether or not they're going to fall out of escrow because, they're going to cancel out after they found out after the fact. They'll already know up front. So it's a really nice way to prepare to get buyers that can actually follow through with the sale.
And Raw is excellent about ordering it right away. And I make sure I get it to her right away.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, we'll do another class at some point about home warranties with seller coverage.
Sure. We're learning all the new CRESS NHD, and I just didn't know that applied to non-CRESS offices. So that's why. So wipe that out of my memory.
There's all kinds of things to offer.
There's not much left in this little brain, but I'm trying.
But thank you for those who joined today. We appreciate your
Yes, thank you very much.
Hopefully we'll see you next time.
See you later, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks,
Bye.
Laura.
Thank
Stay
you.
dry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
You're welcome.